Thanks very much for the very nice introduction. I will try to share my screen if it works. So is that
perfect?
Working?
Yes, great.
Okay, thanks very much. Okay, we'll go back. So this is thanks very much for the very nice introduction, Asun, and for the invitation to speak. It's a real shame that I couldn't travel to Madrid. First, I will kind of introduce myself. That I studied as a mechanical engineer in Ireland in the 90s, and then moved to Germany to work for Hewlett-Packard in kind of their fiber optic communications division for a couple of years. And then I moved to do PhD in Switzerland and a postdoc in Switzerland, and then Marie Curie Fellowship in Germany. And I became a group leader at the same institute. I got involved in kind of research advocacy and kind of researcher organizations probably around 2015 when I joined the Marie Curie Alumni Association, and I became chair of the German chapter, and subsequently became chair of the Marie Curie Alumni Association between 2016 and 2018. And in that role, I had a lot of responsibility for kind of liaising with early career researchers, and both from STEM subjects, but also from the humanities. And just through this experience that I developed an interest in kind of research policy. And when I stepped down as chair of the Marie Curie Alumni Association, I became a member of the governing board of Euroscience, which is an association of grassroots researchers throughout Europe, or a grassroots association representing individual researchers and members of society. And kind of Euroscience aims to kind of intensify the relationship between science and society. And its main activity is running the Euroscience Open Forum, which takes every 2 years and will take place next year in Leiden in the Netherlands. So at the moment, I am working at the Learning and Skills Analytics Group of the Leibniz Information Center for Science and Technology. That's the German National Technology Library, and that's in Hanover in Germany. My talk today will be about many of the kind of the umbrella terms that describe our research culture or how research is done in Europe. So open science, responsible research and innovation, and research culture. And kind of the relationship between them, but also kind of mainly a lot of focus on these aspects is on kind of research evaluation and who gets funding and who develops their career in academia. And my focus will be slightly different. It'll be on the transferable skills for the people who will not stay in academia, so for those who will leave, and how we can bridge the innovation gap that was discussed in the last talk. So how the development of people who can kind of go directly into a non-academic career and use all of the skills and knowledge that they gained through their research. So what is research culture? This is a term that is still not fully defined, that it was introduced largely by an initiative of the Royal Society in the UK to try to change the research culture in the UK, and was taken up by the Wellcome Trust recently. So kind of it's largely a term that has been defined by research funders, and kind of as a way to try to influence how research institutions kind of create a research environment for researchers that is positive for everybody involved. So research culture, it has to do with the generation and transfer of knowledge, that the research careers for researchers is sustainable and could produce value for everybody involved, that researcher well-being is protected, that research evaluation and funding evaluate funding in a fair way, so that every discipline gets access to research funding, but also that the most promising projects get funded and most promising researchers. That ethics and integrity are at the heart of our research culture, that mentorship and supervision are very important in research culture, because most of the experience of early career researchers in particular is through the lens of their supervisor and the supervisory relationship. That there's an aspiration for equality, diversity, and inclusion that isn't always met in our research culture, and there is some conflict, or kind of creative conflict, between collaboration and competition in research. So I think this is, and kind of, firstly, I will talk about the project that I'm working on at the moment is the Researcher Mental Health Observatory Cost Action, and this is a project that gathers together researchers from 32 countries within Europe, and not just researchers, but also practitioners, research managers, career advisors, organizations, psychologists, so that we have a very, very diverse team of people. And we're looking at if there is a crisis among academic researchers. So if you would like to join our cost action, that it's cost action CA 19117, and the website is given there, and you can send me an email. So one of the members of our cost action published a paper in 2017 on work organization and mental health problems in PhD students, and Cahill, and she studied over 3,500 PhD students in Flanders in Belgium, and this social media where people were very surprised by the results, and it showed that 40% of PhD students felt under constant strain, as against 27% of the comparison group of highly educated general population in Flanders. And so across all of the 12 headings that were studied, that the PhD students suffered more from mental health issues and stress. So losing sleep over worry, not being able to overcome difficulties, and so on. So this was something that particularly the institutions in Flanders were not very happy, but I don't think anybody believes that this is just Flanders or just particular institutions. I think particularly for representatives of early career researchers, this was something that many of us felt from our relation, from the questions that we got from young researchers. In the UK, that Susan Guthrie of the RAND Corporation did a literature review of all of the evidence that was available in 2017 or up to 2017, and it showed that higher education staff reported worse well-being than those in many other types of employment, that even in comparison with high-risk groups such as people who work in hospitals, that academics were hiding their mental health conditions, and that PhD students faced specific challenges, that the high level of work demands and the work-life conflict, and low level of job control, and also poor relationship supervisors are quite common, and that they were not included in decision-making. Job insecurity was a key issue. That gender has been shown to be a key personal factor that is a determinant of mental health in academia. This is something that some studies show this, and in other countries, I know in the Netherlands there was a study that didn't show that gender indicated poor mental health. So I think this may be related to the country and to the gender equality in particular countries, or gender inequality. That most researchers love doing research, and much of the more time they spend on research, the less stress they have. And I think this is not just a problem of PhD students. I think that many more senior researchers have kind of a higher administrative load, spend more time writing proposals, spend less time doing research. That poor well-being impacts productivity, and kind of just that the job satisfaction of researchers is unclear. Many researchers see their research environment and research culture, and they don't like it, but they like their colleagues, they like their own work, they may even like their boss, but the wider research culture may be viewed negatively. And kind of there's evidence of effectiveness of mental health interventions is limited. And this is in particular for our project, which is a 4-year project. This is something that we will look at, particularly with practitioners, to see which interventions work. So in Leiden, Inge van der Weijden, another member of our network, wrote a report on the mental well-being of Leiden University PhD candidates based on a survey that she ran. Here I see the suggestions for addressing the problem: appoint independent psychologists, establish a supervisory team for international PhD candidates. But it's, I think in general, even in Germany, I think this is becoming much more common to have multiple supervisors. That career coaching for both non-academic and academic careers is very, very important, including development of transferable skills. This will be the main focus of our talk today. Get supervisor training for both new and experienced supervisors. That many supervisors get their position because they're excellent researchers. It doesn't make them good managers, to deal with finances, human resources, and kind of maybe early career researchers who have different problems and could have may come from a different culture than they do. So transparency with regard to the requirements PhD candidates must meet. This is something that we hear very, very often, is when we kind of say well-being and that young researchers should look after their, should sleep well and do sports and have hobbies and do something apart from research, that very often they come back and say, we have to publish 4 papers in 3 years, and we have no time for these sort of, that sometimes that's the requirements PhD candidates must meet can be excessive. That there should be mentoring for PhD groups and kind of monitoring of the well-being of PhD candidates. Tomorrow, we will have a webinar on academic precarity. This is based on a study that was done by a working group at the OECD. And one of our members, Neda Bibiroglu, was a member of this working group. So we will talk about the career prospects within academia and kind of precarity of research careers. So what issues do early career researchers have? Uncertain career prospects. That very often early career researchers enter PhD program and with the intention of becoming professor. And this, and as the program progresses, that they either lose this ambition or they continue, but very often they're unsure what their prospects outside of academia are, and they have poor awareness of that. Poor work organization is definitely a problem, and this is the development of professional skills, project management, and is quite important, and also for making career outside of academia, because very often this is not trained within academic programs. Lack of independence. International researchers, and there are very, very many international researchers nowadays, have particular problems, particularly with lack of integration in the institution, lack of understanding of the national context that they're working in. There can be lack of support for early career researchers, and particularly poor supervision and communication. And I mean, the supervisor may communicate poorly. Very often early career researchers themselves communicate poorly. Imposter syndrome, this is when researchers could feel that they are not good enough and that they're some sort of fraud and that they should know everything. And of course, if you're an early career researcher, particularly at the beginning, you don't know everything. And very often by the end, when you defend your thesis, that you know more on that topic than anybody else in the room. So there's a problem with publish or perish culture. So that's very often people who leave academia are made to feel like a failure. Because this is both on the side of academia and non-academic employers. Financial problems among early career researchers are quite common, and work-life balance. So I think this is a diagram that was published by the Royal Society in 2010, and it illustrates to some extent the innovation gap, not from the point of view of research outputs, but from the point of view of research personnel. And it shows that the vast majority, almost 80% of people who start a research career will make careers not just outside of academia, but outside of science. So this means that much of the money that was spent training them does not go to the benefit of the industry and innovation within the country. Well, it may do, but it goes into some other type of career, so an alternative career. And this is largely what we need to do, is to train people so that the training they get in an academic context can be transferred to a career in research outside of universities. I think the main takeaway is that kind of very, very few people become professor. I think this is from the UK. This may be different in other countries, but not excessively so. I know that in Germany, probably there is, that the only real secure permanent jobs in German academia are at the level of professor, and most, say, even junior research group leaders are on fixed term contracts, albeit relatively long 5-year or 6-year contracts. But at the lack of security and planability for academics can be very, very high and have an impact on family planning, on kind of whether you kind of buy a house, kind of lots of kind of things that affect your normal life and kind of your family. That a couple of years ago, that Eurodoc published this infographic. I won't go through it all, but it shows the wealth of skills that early career researchers can generate and that they or can be supported to develop such skills. I think that we have from research, and there's a lot of open science skills listed under research, but also data skills and kind of mobility and kind of enterprise skills, teaching and supervision, interpersonal skills, cognitive skills, communication skills, digital skills, and kind of career development skills. And these are kind of transferable across between, whether you're kind of a scientist or working in the humanities. I think of these skills can be developed by any early career researcher, and particularly if they're given support to do so. And very often what I see is that that particularly supervisors don't think that early career researchers are ready to develop their skills or to think about a career outside academia, because they're not yet ready, so it's too early. But I think from day one, career skills should be taught within an academic program, and because you cannot just begin to develop these skills after you finish. I think this is just what you have to be developing along the way. So what is responsible research and innovation? It's largely a term that was invented by the European Commission as a way to bridge the gap between science and society and bring together many different types of stakeholders, and to integrate many of the aspects of research and innovation that promote the more impact and societal impact within research. So it's basically including society as early as possible in the process of research and to align outcomes with societal values. that these are shows the keys of responsible research and innovation. So governance, this is largely about engaging stakeholders and achieving policy impact. Engagement is largely kind of engaging the general public. And science communication. Gender equality would probably now be called equality, diversity, and inclusion, because I think in the last 6 years there have been a lot of developments within kind of equality. Open access is the same, because this was invented for Horizon 2020, where the focus was on open access. I think now kind of the focus is much more on open science than open access. Ethics and integrity should be at the heart of our research, and education, so lecturing, also kind of involving promoting research careers to students and to school children. What is open science? I won't go very, very deeply into open science, because this has already been explained in the last talk, at least in the context of Horizon Europe. So that open access, open science was seen originally as very, very highly focused on open access. So how researchers publish papers. And this is only part of research, and particularly in the humanities, maybe a paper in an open access journal isn't the main research output for people from the humanities. Maybe they publish a book. So there can be much more kind of nuanced forms of research output. Kind of open source is quite important. This is kind of is about kind of code, and that is computer programs that are developed within research projects, as well as kind of hardware, which I mean, I noticed, I have seen open hardware projects, but this is not very common within, at least within mechanical. I've very rarely seen open hardware projects published. Open evaluation, open peer review, citizen science. This is involving citizens in your scientific work. Sometimes, for example, I've seen a project where in astrophysics, where the public were invited to visually assess galaxies to say if they were turning right or left, or which type of galaxy there was, because the data set was so huge and it needed human intervention, and that this was done by citizens. Open innovation is to do with involving open science within innovative processes. Open notebook and open data are very, very closely related. This is to do with kind of recording your data from experiments and making them open in a way that can be used. And this is addressed in the previous talk about data management plans. Open educational resources is quite close to my interests, because in Hanover we're working on the use of open educational resources in a recommender system. So open educational resources are resources such as MOOCs and videos on YouTube or some other portal, where you can access open kind of training for many topics. In Hanover, we're developing an open educational resources for data science training. Open science skills, this is a very, very wide topic I won't talk about very directly here, but there is a huge amount of skills that need to be developed by researchers, in some cases just to keep up with the requirements of Horizon Europe projects, data management, that in many cases that the leading organizations within Europe are quite up to speed with supporting such developments, and some of the others are lagging. So I think that there is need to make training in open science skills, but also in developing infrastructure such as European Open Science Cloud, and so to make this common throughout Europe, but also supported. For the last part of my talk, I will talk about the evaluation of research careers acknowledging open science practices. This was a report that was written by a working group appointed by the European Commission and it was largely focused on kind of research assessment and how to assess the engagement of researchers with open science and also responsible research and innovation practices. And they developed an open science career assessment matrix. And this is, I think Asun and I were working on a responsible research and innovation project called New Horizons. And through this, we looked at this OSCAM matrix and kind of assessed assessed each of these headings from the point of view of developing transferable skills that can be useful outside of academia. And so in many cases, these are the things that are kind of away from kind of H factor and kind of publish or perish, but are the skills that researchers develop when they're engaging with society, and that these are the skills that will help them to make career outside of academia, should they so wish. So that kind of research output is of course publishing, but it's all research activity, and most of the skills that most important skills that researchers will develop are directly from the research activity, whether this is working with an atomic force microscope or whatever technical skills that they need to do their job. Publishing open access, firstly, potential employers are much more likely to be able to access publications that are open access than behind a paywall, that they will read the title, the abstract, and they won't be able to, I mean, if they have time, they won't be able to see the publication. The data sets, the kind of data sets are accessible to and of value researchers outside of the private sector. And so this gives kind of this, making data sets open is a certain amount of work, or a huge amount of work for institutions and researchers, but it does provide value in the, promoting either collaboration with industry partners, but also bringing attention to the work of young researchers. That kind of researchers who publish open source code demonstrate the quality and practical relevance of their work to non-academic employers. And many, say, tech startups make extensive use of and contributions to open source code. And it's also that if research institutions know that code will have to be published open source, they will need to train researchers, and particularly early career researchers, to write better code and more presentable code and more professional code, so that directly their skills become more transferable. The writing research proposals is a way to develop skills. So funding is kind of activities around funding, that if you write research proposals, you will learn to express yourself precisely and concisely in a way that demonstrates critical thinking and persuasion. And this is directly transferable to many careers outside of academia. I mean, I know many researchers from the humanities who have made a career in research management and advising people on applying for funding. That research impact is about participating in public engagement, and kind of that you kind of showing the societal impact of your work, and also kind of communicating the work to the general public and to peers. And this kind of is one of the main problems for making careers outside academia, is when kind of industry partners say that kind of academia is a different world where people communicate differently and have different mindsets. And so sometimes the best way to change your mindset is communicate. That's the research process. Is about particularly stakeholder engagement, and citizen science is about actively engaging stakeholders in the research process. And one of the best ways to find a job or knowledge about jobs outside of academia is to engage stakeholders, because if a stakeholder is interested enough in your research, they may that may be the most direct way to transfer from an academic career to a non-academic career, is to work in, whether that be the stakeholder be in an NGO or in government or in industry. And citizen science helps kind of researchers to involve citizens in the research, but to organize their work in such a way that they can involve and engage citizens. That is quite a lot of work. And so this, and particularly develops communication skills. That personal conduct and research integrity is the basis for all professional relationships inside and outside academia, and fully recognizing the contribution of others and teams, including collaborators, co-authors, citizens, open data providers, by citing all contributions and research outputs, including code and data sets. Open science requires academics to make data management plans and to assess risk within their research work. And this means that early career researchers are obliged to plan their work much better and develop much improved project management skills than they otherwise would be. That's teaching and supervision. That experience gained from teaching develops presentation and communication skills, and open up careers in teaching and training outside of academia. That taking advantage of mentorship programs is a way for early career researchers to develop contacts to mentors outside of academia. And this can be very, very, very useful to find out what life outside academia is like, or in a particular industry, and to develop networks. That early career researchers often gain experience of supervision and co-supervision of student projects, and this helps them to develop leadership skills and research and team management. So service and leadership is often neglected in kind of assessment of research careers, but I think that leadership is very, very important for researchers inside academia, but also outside, so that they can leave academia. If you're a postdoc and you leave, you don't want to kind of enter industry at an entry-level position that you could have entered when you were a master's student or after your master's. So I think that academia needs to develop leadership within particularly postdocs, so that they can take leadership within academia, but also outside. And peer review is a way for researchers to develop critical thinking skills and to communicate at a higher level than they may have previously needed to. So I think this is quite important. And networking is something that many researchers neglect if they're very, very focused on their topic, that sometimes they neglect to reach out to people maybe in a different country, in a different institution, or even in the same institution. So I think networking is something that very often that researchers learn much later than other people, if they had left academia more earlier. Kind of professional experience, that's continuing professional development, allows those who are no longer attached to university to follow and contribute to the newest research, so that you can kind of involve people from even if you leave academia, that is not the end of your professional development. That you can have I think project management skills I've talked about before, that open science definitely demands much improved project management skills from researchers. I think many researchers say that they cannot plan their research. Particularly, I've heard from kind of a pure mathematician who could have said that he doesn't know what he will be working on in 1 year. But I think in many more applied fields, this is definitely the case, that project management is becoming essential, and that just by kind of developing the personal qualities needed to engage with society and research users through open science, with citizens, with stakeholders, that you show the flexibility and perseverance necessary to respond to the challenges of making career outside academia or inside academia. And we need to work on helping early career researchers to do this through their research. So I think with that, I thank you very much, and I ask you, if you have interest, to join our cost action. Our webpage is here, and my email is kind of brian.cahill@tib.eu if you have any questions, and I will be delighted to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you very much. Also, Beñat, thank you very much. And we have the floor open for questions, comments for both speakers. I think you have provided a very comprehensive panorama of the research that we are carrying at the European Commission in Europe. And we do have many participants in the conference, also from the United States. I don't know, because of time, location, they may not be, and they may not have joined us yet. I don't know. But I was wondering whether, you know, any of those American participants might be able to comment and provide questions related to the differences, the different approaches that, for example, the European Commission is taking in the, you know, for example, I think in Beñat's talk, it was very clear the idea of the missions and impact, and of course also in Brian's, the idea of open science and involving all sectors of society, involving people. So I was wondering whether the NSF, which is the National Science Foundation in the United States and main funding organization there, whether there are any differences or whether they are, you know, carrying similar approaches. This is, you know, I'm just curious, and perhaps when someone in the audience might be able to give us some insights. And of course, the floor, it's open for questions and comments, either on the chat online or here. So please.
Remember, we can you can use the both language, Spanish and
Yes,
English. Podéis hablar en español también.
Yeah, you can use both languages, and we can also translate.
I want to say that I feel a little more concerned about our mental health. But I think it's
that's a great topic. The mental health of academics. So if anybody wants to comment, because we don't have a microphone to go around, but please come over and you can come and speak here on the speaker here. So no comments, no questions. We're gonna have a coffee outside in a few minutes, and we can of course talk. But unfortunately, Brian and Beñat cannot join us. So you do have a comment. Please come over so that they. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So that they can also actually see you. So please. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much to both of you. I think these are very interesting talks. I would have a question to Beñat Bilbao Osorio concerning the Horizon 2021. One always has the impression as a humanist that there aren't too many chances to really get the funding, because the humanities are not in the center of the interest of the programs. So what would you recommend as a strategy for getting funding? Would it be good to be a group of humanists who try to join questions of science, or would it even be better to form a group of humanists and scientists together to apply for funding? So probably you will have experiences from the past. What recommendations could you give in terms of strategy?
So maybe, first of all, I would not say that humanities is not at the center of our coalition programs. I think that it is very much at the center, but what it is also true is that there is not this dedicated type of goals for humanities, as I was mentioning, that this is cross-cutting and it's the way that we think that research should be conducted in order to have answers for society. In terms of the strategies to go forward, try to have funding, I think that both approaches that you were mentioning, so one, to have a dedicated type of a network of researchers on humanity coming together to propose humanity-specific topics may find their way, especially under cluster 2. I think that that's one of the approaches that we may have, because in that particular cluster you can find cause that could be relevant for humanities. And the second approach is, and I still make complete for that approach, is to come closer to other disciplines in order to provide holistic answers in their proposals, so that when a consortium is coming together and they have one particular focus, let's say, around climate change, climate mitigation, etc., I think that the humanity component should be embedded in there, because it is an important and integral part of how you want to provide a solution and tackle it. So I think you can go both ways in order to get funding from Horizon Europe.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So anybody else want to our follow open science? Anybody want to comment or ask a question?
Okay, I think it's very interesting because we are just at the moment where the areas of knowledge are open themselves. So humanities and sciences should collaborate more and more with other areas of knowledge, maybe. Here in Spain, we have very close areas of knowledge. For instance, in this faculty, we are working in the social sciences sphere, but in history, we work in other fields of the knowledge. And we should to be a wider view for this one, because I think Europeans' plans for the future maybe will reduce these areas we have here in the space.
Well, what you heard that David is going to be the next coordinator of our competency office for entrepreneurship, and it's symptomatic that someone from the humanities is going to be directing the office and trying to do all networking, because there is a report of the European Commission and the previous program, Horizon 2020, whether the cross-cutting that has mentioned, whether it worked for the humanities, and it didn't actually. It integrated many of the disciplines from the social sciences, for example, economics or marketing, or because it makes sense to have those kind of people in the project. But it was unfortunately not a success for the humanities. So I think we need to work much harder to gain visibility and to make us to make our presence felt and to show them that there is a need for us to be there. You know? So hopefully from Complutense, David is going to make sure that happens. And I don't know if Brian or Bonat have any other suggestions of how we could, you know, not just the social sciences, because it is true, like, that many of the disciplines from social sciences have better success at integration, but also like pure humanities. And for example, in climate change, I am in literature. I teach literature. So how can we contribute to topic missions like climate change? No, in science fiction, in dystopia writing, we have a lot of forecasts of things that can happen, because many writers have these visions of the future that can that becomes unfortunately has become a reality in the last couple of years. No? So we just have to find ways of opening this up, and of course creating avenues like this one, this conference, where we try to see what the skills we can contribute, and then of course make our voices heard, so that we have impact. So
we have another speaker.
we have a great
Hi, where's the hand?
the
Over
camera
there.
here, but
Okay.
but-
Sorry. Hi. Anyway, I'm sorry. I just arrived from the Canary Island and slept just a little bit. I was thinking that, well, I would like to know your opinion about the word skills, because it has been translated into Spanish as something which maybe to some people they sounded like only business, which is not a bad thing, because by one side, economics comes from oikos nomos, which, if I'm not wrong, it means the law of the house. Probably it was the beginning of the science, when it wasn't a science yet. And maybe I'm not sure. Remember, I have a kind of strange jet lag, but probably because of my age as well. Maybe we have to. Maybe we can agree or collaborate from humanities if we consider, which as Professor has said, it appears in literature and it appears as well all over the history, I think, if we work the skill of being a human being. But I want to know your point. That's it.
I think there's a lot in it, because I think that's what I mean. Even if you talk with kind of with the industry partners, or sometimes they talk about the academic mindset and kind of the mindset that prevails. But I think that everybody wants to work in the sort of mindset that suits their own background, and if you're that kind of industry could be kind of an NGO, or it could be government or public administration, or it could be very many other, or in a kind of a newspaper, and the newspaper business isn't going great at the moment either. But I think that there are many kind of fields where humanities graduates have better communication skills and ways of expressing themselves than STEM graduates. And kind of for many of the ways of engaging with society, that kind of these come more naturally to kind of humanities graduates. So I don't really see kind of on the kind of playing field of skills and competences, I don't see a huge difference. I think that generally on critical thinking, that very often the humanities and kind of social sciences are way ahead. Where it kind of sometimes kind of as an engineer or as a kind of in life sciences, if you are working very, very tightly on a very technical problem, that the relevance of that or the transferability of that to some other field can be quite low. It's, I mean, and most employers will look at it and say, well, that's not what we do. And I think that into humanities, I think the transferability, it can also be very specific if you're studying medieval history. But I think that generally the kind of written kind of basis of humanities is much deeper than in the general sciences, where often it's more based on the figures and the graphs and kind of the experimental design, and then the writing is kind of is purely superfluous. So I think that kind of very often the expression and the level of expression among humanities graduates is better than among STEM graduates. It's not always the case, but often. And I think to go back to the question, which was about kind of the inclusion within Horizon Europe of the humanities, I think Bernard said in his talk that kind of that in Pillar 1, in the Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions and in the ERC, there is no thematic guidance at all. It's all bottom up. And as far as I know, that in ERC from now on, or in Marie Skłodowska-Curie from actions from now on, that there will not be a pot of money dedicated to humanities and social science. It will be completely proportional with the number of applications from whichever panel, what was previously panels. So this means that I know that previously the humanities graduates or kind of researchers from the humanities complained to me. I had no responsibility, but they complained that there was much higher applications from researchers from the humanities, and this was cut so that they received a lower percentage of the funding than maybe from economics or from, well, economics is social science, but from kind of the life sciences, for example, which were prioritized. And I know from now on this is going to be the case. And particularly within Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions, we always run into debates with researchers in humanities who felt excluded, and we tried our best to, at least from the language we used, to not talk about science and scientists, but to talk about research and researchers, and to be more inclusive in how we address these problems. But I can understand from the point of view of the Directorate General for Research and Innovation that they get their directions from national governments and from the top level of the Commission about what the priorities for this program are. And if it's climate change, there are many researchers in all sorts of STEM fields who cannot contribute to climate change either. So I think this is the general debate whether research funding should be led by politicians and policymakers or bottom up from researchers.
Maybe if I can add just a couple of comments on the first one in the previous answer. I think that, you know, humanities is fundamental also for problem definition. I think that sometimes, you know, the problem definition part of the projects gets a little bit out of the equation, or not so much out of the equation, but it's not seen as so fundamental. And I think that the humanities fields have a very strong role to play in there. So just to highlight that, so it's about, you know, skills, communicating, etc. But very importantly, I think it's problem definition. I think this is fundamental. Research starts with that problem definition angle. And here I think that it's a strong role for humanities. And then just to confirm what Brian was saying, so pillar one, it's a bottom-up approach, so it can come from whichever field. It's not directed into any particular themes. And then in the definition of the priority for the research areas, let's not forget that this is a decision process, where on the one hand, indeed, so we have member states and what member states thinks should be the priorities, etc. And the second legislative actor is the European Parliament, that it's also in there. So this is a little bit how the program is put together and how the priorities are set out. But yeah, I still think that the opportunity should be there. I hear, the difficulties that many times, some researchers in the humanities field may find in the way. I think that, coming back to the previous answer, defining strategies on how to work together closer together with other scientists in other fields and disciplines. It's something that it might be important. I understand it's not simple, but maybe that's there might be some actions or strategies in trying to create this joint dialogue with other scientists.